80% of the entire world's maritime oil trade flows through just three narrow passages. These passages are at the Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Malacca and the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. These points are what we call as choke points, as in if you choke these points, the major part of the world trade itself will come to a standstill. If this is very clear to you, let's understand these choke points better. The Strait of Hormuz is a strait between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. The Strait of Malacca, as you know, is this place between the Malay Peninsula and the Indian Ocean island of Sumatra. The Bab el-Mandeb is a strait between Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula, Djibouti and Eritrea in the Horn of Africa. This strait connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Eden. And apart from these three choke points, we have four more, which are the Mozambique Channel, the Suez Canal, the Sunda Strait and the Lombok Strait. China has very clearly entered very close to all these choke points. To establish dominance over the Strait of Hormuz, China has the Gwadar port in Pakistan on a 40-year lease. And it also has its infrastructure and railway lines to Iran. To establish dominance over the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb and the Suez Canal, China has debt-trapped Djibouti to build its naval base. And then, to capitalize on the Strait of Malacca, Sunda Strait and the Lombok Strait, China has made strategic alliance with Indonesia to build its infrastructure projects. And if you go through the details of the Chinese relations very closely, you will see that China has already established very close relations with the Mozambique government and has established control over a port called the Dar es Salaam port in Tanzania. So in short, the world trade can be stopped within a jiffy if you have control over these choke points, and at the same time, if you do not have control over these points, your enemy can block your trade in no time. And quite evidently, China has slowly extended its dominance over all these choke points. China has been building infrastructure projects in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Pakistan and Djibouti. Why? Because all of these regions fall in the trade route of China's oil imports and their exports to Africa, Middle East and Europe. So we have the Gwadar port in Pakistan, Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, Djibouti's naval base and even Myanmar's Quake Phu port. This is what is being called as the strings of pearls theory. Firstly, China strategically used Djibouti, Sri Lanka, Myanmar and Pakistan's weak economic situation to surround India. This is how China is literally building its own trade route to become an economic superpower. And in this process, China intends to surround its rivals like India and eventually gain military and economic advantage over the United States. This is what we have covered until now. Now, when China is doing so many things, India is obviously not a saint to keep quiet and let China become stronger, right? So the question over here is, what exactly is India doing to tackle the security implications of the Belt and Road Initiative? What is India's strategy to face China in case of a military conflict? And lastly, what are the study materials to help you understand India's geopolitical moves better? First, let's start from the counter for China's strategic placement at Gwadar and Djibouti. For this, India has very cleverly placed its base over here in Oman. And here's where we have the Dakum port. The Dakum port is where India's important crude imports flow from the Persian Gulf. This place is strategically located on the southeastern seaboard of Oman and is overlooking both the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. On top of that, it is also straddled along the critical sea lanes in the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Eden. And all thanks to India's relation with Oman, we have military access to this port, which makes it a great defense point. Then we come to this region that is close to the second choke point, which is the Mozambique Channel. In 2015, Modi ji signed an agreement with the Seychelles president to develop a place called the Assumption Island for military use. But unfortunately, after this deal was done, there were a lot of protests, there was a change in government, because of which this diamond as of now is in a shaky situation. Then we come to perhaps the most important choke point of all, which is the Strait of Malacca and the other two choke points right beside it. Here's where we have the Changi Naval Base, wherein in 2018, Modi ji signed an agreement with the government of Singapore. This agreement has provided direct access to the Indian Navy itself. So while sailing through the South China Sea, the Indian Navy can refuel and rearm its ship through this base. This is followed by the Sabang port in Indonesia. And again, in 2018, India got military access to Sabang port, which is located right at the entrance of the Malacca Strait. So theoretically, we have a firm grip over the Strait of Malacca. And if you remember from our China's BRA video, 70% of China's oil supply and 60% of their trade passes through the Strait of Malacca. So choking this point is like choking the Chinese economy itself. After that, we have the Indo-Vietnam Diamond, and long story short, we have historically had a great relationship with Vietnam. We supply some of the most important defense equipment to Vietnam, and we have signed a comprehensive strategic partnership with Vietnam in 2016 itself. Then we have our important diamond in Japan. On 9th of September 2020, India and Japan signed something called the Acquisition and Cross-Servicing Agreement that would allow militaries of both these countries to exchange supplies and services on a reciprocal basis. So again, Japan and India can use each other's port as per their strategic requirements. And the best part about this point is that if you look at the map, you will see that it gives us a very close placement to the mainland of China itself. And then we have Mongolia, where Modi ji became the first Indian Prime Minister to visit, and more importantly, India has established a very strong relation with Mongolia by giving out a $1 billion credit to develop an air corridor for Mongolia. And lastly, we have the Chabahar port in Iran. And if you remember from our China video again, Iran is also a part of the Chinese BRI initiative, wherein they have a railway line from China to Iran, passing through Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan to finally ending at Tehran in Iran. So here's where India very cleverly understood the importance of Iran. So in 2015 itself, when Iran was facing crippling economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation, India agreed to develop a deep water port in Chabahar on the Gulf of Oman. And as a part of this deal, Modi ji visited Iran and signed the agreement worth $500 million to develop this port and related infrastructure. And if you see, it's not just strategic with respect to China's infra in Iran, but also very close to the Gwadar port in Pakistan. Now, if you connect all these points together on the world map, you will see that it's literally a necklace around China, and more importantly, they are strategically located points that can be used to counter the Chinese in case of any military conflict. This is what India is doing to make sure that we are protected from the notorious Chinese moves.
India might be looking to counter China's influence in East Africa.
It's a really interesting topic.
And get this.
Yeah.
The key player in all of this might be Somaliland.
You got it. We're basing this deep dive on a recent article from The Strategist.
Okay.
That's the Australian Strategic Policy Institute's blog.
Gotcha.
And honestly, it makes a pretty compelling case for why Somaliland could be so important for India's ambitions.
And it's strategically located right on the Red Sea. And it's home to the port of Berbera.
Ooh, a port on the Red Sea. That sounds...
It's important.
Important, yeah.
And I think the article mentioned something about a historical connection between India and Berbera.
Right. Back during the British Raj, Berbera was a vital link connecting India with Ethiopia.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, there's definitely a historical dimension to the story.
Fascinating.
But what makes Somaliland particularly attractive to India today is its stability. It's been a functioning democracy for over 30 years.
Wow.
Which is pretty amazing when you consider the ongoing turmoil in Somalia.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable, over 30 years of democracy in that region.
It is.
It sounds like Somaliland offers like a level of stability that's pretty hard to come by.
It's a safe haven in a troubled region.
Yeah.
And that stability is a major draw for India.
Okay.
Especially considering their concerns about China's influence in Africa.
Right.
India is understandably wary of China's expanding footprint.
Makes sense.
Particularly their military base in Djibouti.
Oh, wow.
Which is just a short distance from Berbera.
Berbera could be like India's answer to China's presence in Djibouti?
Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
Okay.
A way for them to establish a strategic foothold without having to rely on a port controlled by a rival. It's more than that. Berbera is actually incredibly efficient.
Oh,
in fact, the World Bank's Container Port Performance Index ranks Berbera higher than Kenya's Mombasa port.
Really?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
It's a sign of its potential.
I'm starting to see why India might be so interested.
Right.
A stable democratic nation.
Yeah.
An efficient port.
In
a strategically vital location.
It's the whole package.
It really does tick a lot of boxes.
It does.
This brings us to another interesting part of this whole thing.
Okay.
The UAE.
Right. The UAE has made substantial investments in Berbera.
Okay.
They've been expanding the port.
Wow.
Building a free trade zone.
They've even secured an air and naval base for themselves.
They're all in.
So it sounds like they're already a major player in Somaliland.
Definitely. Somaliland made a bold move by recognizing Taiwan.
Wow.
Which directly challenges China's One China policy.
That is a power move.
It is.
But how does that impact the situation with India?
Well, by aligning itself with Taiwan, this creates a unique opportunity for India to step in and offer support to Somaliland.
Okay.
Both as a counter to Chinese pressure.
Gotcha.
And as a way to further their own interests in the region.
So Somaliland's risky move could actually work in their favor.
It's possible. Well, if India sees Somaliland as a key to countering China's influence,
Okay.
they're more likely to provide economic aid, diplomatic backing, even military assistance.
So India could give Somaliland the resources and protection they need to actually stand up to China.
Exactly. That's the idea.
That'd be huge for Somaliland.
It would be a game changer for a nation that has been striving for international recognition for decades.
Right.
India, a major global power, throws their weight behind Somaliland. It could have a domino effect.
So you're saying other countries might be more inclined to follow suit if they see India taking the lead?
It's possible.
That would be a major diplomatic win for Somaliland.
It would. Well, India has several key interests in East Africa.
Okay.
First and foremost, they want to secure their access to vital shipping lanes
Okay.
through the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean.
Those are crucial for India's economy, right?
Yeah, we're talking about the lifeblood of their trade with Europe, the Middle East, and Africa itself.
Those shipping lanes are critical.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And a base in Berbera would give India a significant advantage in ensuring the stability and security of those routes.
It would allow them to project power in the region, counter piracy,
Right?
respond quickly to any threats to their shipping interests.
Exactly.